Hello, I'm Ray Smith. This will be the chapter or the tutorial that's coordinated to the chapter on teaching the basics. We'll just go over the very basic things that a saxophone player has to do. They're unique to him, actually. And the way we produce sound on the saxophone is unique. That's number one, tone production. And that's what this video will deal with, because I'm going to break this into, I think, 3 parts. The second part deals with teaching articulation, which is the second unique thing we do. And the third video will deal with teaching technical development. And these will just be a beginning basic survey of some of the things that we have to teach and do. Okay, let's start in tone production. There are really 4 major elements of tone production on the saxophone. One, embouchure. Embouchure is a French word that refers to how the mouth is shaped and how it relates to the mouthpiece in the saxophone and the reed. Second is the oral cavity. Third is breast support, the muscles from the stomach, the abdominal muscles, and the intercostal rib muscles. And fourth would be the setup, your instrument, your mouthpiece, your ligature, your reed. And we'll deal with those things in this tutorial, as well as just the basics of teaching vibrato, which I think can go along with our tone production tutorial. All right, so anyway, here we go. Let's look at teaching the embouchure. The way I teach the embouchure, and I'm going to just use the alto for this. Some of the demonstrations may be on some of the other saxophones. The way I deal with teaching the embouchure is I actually like to compare and contrast the saxophone embouchure with the clarinet embouchure. I grew up as a clarinet player first and then came to the saxophone, so it's helpful to me to see that contrast of what we do and don't do that's similar to the clarinet. This is the biggest difference between the clarinet and clarinet is really how we produce sound, because it is fairly different. But there are some similarities in the embouchure. Clarinet embouchure, I would teach as a tug-of-war. E, muscles are pulled tight across the teeth. Oo, trying to maintain the E. It's an E-oo tug-of-war. We're going to see on the saxophone that the oo wins. The thrust is roundness. But our first step in the embouchure is, what about the lower lip? See, with the clarinet, we stretch it. We don't want to do that. This very thin lip isn't going to help. I think the biggest thing to realize is that the saxophone and the clarinet are very different lengths of instruments. When you just look at the saxophone and you put a clarinet next to it, because I could do that, it would look about the same length. But then what if you straighten out the bell and then straighten out the neck? We're going to realize that this instrument is considerably longer than the clarinet. And of course, if it's longer, then it plays lower. If it plays lower, do we want the reed to vibrate faster or slower? Obviously, the clarinet reed needs to vibrate very fast. The saxophone reed needs to vibrate considerably slower. If we try to make it vibrate as fast as the clarinet, and I think this does happen quite often with students, if we try to make it vibrate that fast, it backfires. We're not aligned with Mother Nature, and Mother Nature says, not helping you. No way. If we can align with Mother Nature, where we're producing the same kind of reed speed that the tube is set up to vibrate at. In other words, we're trying to reach maximum resonancy, or the natural frequency, or the optimum frequency of the tube. So we've got to have our embouchure and our air matched to the slower vibrations that we need from the reed relative to the very fast vibrations we need with the clarinet. Now, the clarinet, then, if we make a really thin, tight lip here against the reed, that's going to speed the reed up. With the saxophone, we can use a little fatter, spongier, more cushiony kind of lip here, which will help slow the reed down a little bit, actually. So if we try to play the saxophone with a clarinet embouchure, it really won't work. So instead of pulling in the first step, I would just say, bring the lower lip over the lower teeth, and I'm not pulling side to side. I'm just bringing it over, and I'm leaving it on the front top of those bottom teeth, so there's a little cushion there. We call it the fat lip embouchure versus the thin lip of the clarinet. Okay, so step one, I'm just going to bring just enough lip over. Now sometimes you see the lip really hanging out. Might get away with that on tenor. It doesn't work well on soprano, not as well on alto either if you go too far extreme with that, because we're vibrating a little faster on those instruments than we are on the tenor. I don't think we want to have an extremely pronounced, but it does come out on the front. It doesn't tuck over the top tight and thin like the clarinet, but it is just barely over the teeth. We do need to have the teeth cushioned. There's a cushion between the teeth and the reed. So now the second step is the top teeth. We actually do put the top teeth on the mouthpiece. This way. And there's several things connoted, I think, in this top teeth step. One is, I think that, first of all, we've got to deal with how much reed to put in the mouth. If you turn the reed sideways and look between the reed and the mouthpiece, hold it up to the light so you can see in between, the reed doesn't actually touch the mouthpiece until somewhere down in here. If you think about this logically, if you put your mouth above that and firm up, you're going to choke the reed. If you put it very much below that, it's really hard down here. You don't have the control you need. So up here, we got a ton of control and no tone. Down here, we got a ton of tone and no control. It's honky, splatty, maybe squawky. If we can go about the lower lip, about where the reed touches the mouthpiece, this is with a little experimentation there, for personal mouthpiece reed, you'll find the spot where we have maximum tone and control at the same time. That's what we're looking for. So I need to put that amount of reed in the mouth with my top teeth on the mouthpiece. And then I need to control the angle at this point too. And I want, with the neck strap, I'm going to adjust the neck strap so that the horn just pivots directly to my mouth. I don't want to be reaching up for it or too low of a neck strap reaching down for it. No, I want to adjust my neck strap. This is with the bottom of the horn forward on the leg. I want to adjust it so it pivots directly into the mouth. This way. Then I'm going to rotate the mouthpiece so that my head is straight. And then I'm going to, I may also need to move the neck a little bit. If I need to move the neck, I've got a little bit of leeway on where I can pivot the neck as well as rotate the mouthpiece to get comfortable where I'm not in a weird position where I've got my head cocked off or something. So I'm going to try to have you see this. I'm going to turn on a little more light here so that hopefully this is easier to see. Okay, so fat lip, no tug of war. Oh, by the way, the third step is the ooh. So I've got lower lip over the teeth, sitting on the front bottom teeth, top teeth, and then round closure around the mouthpiece. It's like a drawstring purse where we pull the strings and it tightens up, or like a marble bag or a duffel bag or something where you're pulling strings and it brings it in, gathers it in around equally. We're looking for that kind of thing on the embouchure. Not a clamp. It's not like a purse that has hinges on the side, clasp in the middle, and it clamps down, opens like a clamp. Instead, it's a round closure. So the three steps that I'm looking for are the lower lip, top teeth, and ooh. The ooh wins the tug of war. We got a round embouchure. So looking at it straight on the mouthpiece. It's round. There's a little bit of the lip coming out slightly. On the clarinet, it would look like this. We're not looking for that kind of thing. It thins out the sound, makes the pitch sharp. Not going to let the reed vibrate where it wants to vibrate, and we lose some of the overtones. So we're not looking for that flat chin that we see on the clarinet. I think the chin is still kind of in a downward position, but it's not a big deal what the chin's doing. The reason that's a big deal on the clarinet is because that's part of the stretch on the lip. We pull this point on the lip, and we pulled this way vertically on the lip as well. And that's why the flat chin has got to be there on the clarinet, not important on the saxophone. In fact, I have some students who come in playing with a flat chin. Not really a good thing on the saxophone. It speeds the reed up a little more and doesn't really help. I see them especially put that in the low register. No. Let me show you a side view here. Maybe from the other side. This is our basic setup then in the mouth. Let me switch now to the oral cavity. That's our second parameter in tone production. And I like to use this little exercise with my students. Put your hand on your Adam's apple. Now follow it as you swallow. Goes up. Follow it as you yawn. Goes down. Now, the yawning is when our throat is most open, as opposed to the swallowing when our throat is most closed. So I'm going to want to get the student to, I think most people this goes down when they inhale, because most people don't inhale like, they just drops down, opens up the throat. We let the air in. I've got that when I inhale, but what about when I exhale? So I inhale, goes down. When I exhale, does it go right back up? Of course, what we can school here is that it stays down. Add pressure, still down there. Now that's something you can do when you ride in a car or watching television or whatever. You can sit there and practice that coordination. It's just a physical coordination, but it needs to happen on the horn. So when we start to play, that's down, so it gives us a deep oral cavity. We want that openness in the back. I kind of think of the saxophone as an incomplete tube. We need to finish the tube inside the body. That'll give a little more natural resonance to the sound. What happens in the oral cavity, of course, is controlled mostly by the tongue. The tongue is raising or lowering. There's a multi-positions that the tongue can have. It can be laying more flat, or it can arch up. The arch part can be lifted, it can be pulled back. The front part can be pulled in or up, in or down, up or down. There's a lot of settings that can happen there, and the tongue is very active inside the oral cavity there in producing what we call oral cavity voicing. I think the first time we hit that with a young student is when they go down. I don't know if I can do it right now. And it won't stay down there. I've got a young student right now that is having that issue. So I said, have you ever whistled? No, she'd never whistled. So I had her blow with the airstream. You blow a high and a low. It's kind of a half whistle. What's your tongue doing? Oh yeah. Start to become sensitive that my tongue's moving around in there to do that stuff. And then I say, okay, now when you go to the low notes, go yo. And those low notes will play low if my voicing happens. If my voicing stays high, it'll be popping up. So I think that's one of the first times we encounter voicing. We're going to see a lot more with voicing when we do the warm-up studies, and as we work on intonation and altissimo and tone and everything we got to do on the saxophone has this oral cavity involvement that's very, very important. The voicing. And we'll deal with that as we go along a lot more. Usually once I've just kind of taught the basic concept of that, then I let the overtone series, overtone exercises and the flexibility exercise, we'll go over those in a little while on the warm-up pages. Those will take care of developing what I call the mature oral cavity. The oral cavity that's flexible, that can control a lot of things. And that's very involved in tone, very involved in intonation, very involved in jazz effects, very involved in altissimo, a lot of things where that's involved. It's like a magic thing that has to be happening. And I think that's where a lot of the students are struggling. But we'll come back to that. Let me move on to breath support. I think this is one of the more difficult things to teach. simply because so much of our pedagogy is invisible. I mean, we've already talked about some invisible things that happen here in the embouchure, some invisible things that are happening in the oral cavity with the tongue and so on, and the muscles of the abdominal area. It's all invisible. And the lungs. It's very difficult to teach these things well because we can't just see them. I mean, if you're studying piano or violin, the pedagogy is right out there where you can see all of it. But for us wind players, the pedagogy is invisible. And that makes it really much more difficult to teach some of these concepts. So I want to be sure that that you understand where I'm coming from, that as long as the student has had nothing to make this a concrete experience, they will not understand what's going on with breath support. And I think for most of us, it was a nebulous concept for quite a long time. Almost all of my college students that show up are still really not quite sure about how it all works, and most of the time I need to help that happen. I'll show you how I help it happen. I think we have to develop a referent in concrete experience. This is a little educational psychology jargon, but if a person has not had an experience with a thing, let me give an example. Let's say that you want to help a person understand what honey tastes like, and they've never tasted honey. So you say, well, it's really thick, and it's sticky, and it's sweet, and it really tastes good. And you try to describe this the best you can. Then the student tastes hot fudge. You say, oh, this must be honey. It's sweet, it's very thick, tastes good, it's sticky, it fits all the same qualifications as honey. Well, that student, if they've never tasted honey, they'll not be able to differentiate that. But if I give them just a little taste of honey on the tip of a finger, bam, they know what honey tastes like from now on, and they'll never confuse that with hot fudge. So I think that's what we've got to do for our students as much as we can with these invisible processes, is we've got to help them become concrete experiences where they have a referent. So when we use a concept symbol, such as breath support, that's simply a symbol that represents nothing to most kids. They might even get very good at saying all the watchwords like, well, support, sit up straight, don't chest breathe, use your diaphragm, all these things that people say, but they don't really mean anything in experience. So my goal in teaching breath support is that before that student leaves, they have felt me do it, and they have felt them do it in concrete reality, so that when I say that concept symbol, breath support, it says, bam, I know what that feels like, and there's a referent for it. So this is, I'm going to demonstrate how I go about accomplishing that. And the first thing that I do, and I think for this to happen, so you can see my body, I'm going to move the camera back a little bit and get a wider shot here. Now, I'll have the student put their fingertips into my stomach here, just a little below the ribs, just in this area, and then I'll play something. So on, and I'll let them feel while I'm playing, and they will, and then I'll say, "What did you feel?" "Oh, I felt the muscles working down there." Hopefully they'll say that, or I might have to draw it out of them a little bit. But really, that's all I'm looking for at this point is, what is it? What do you feel? I feel muscles working. Okay, great. Now feel where your rib ends are. Oh, they end about right here. Now what if those rib ends are down in the middle of those muscles? How effectively can those muscles work now? Oh yeah, I see what you mean. They're really hampered by that. So the first step in getting in breath support is to get set up in the body so that we don't have this problem. So one, sit up straight. But I can sit up apparently straight and still have my rib cage really dropped. So I make this step 2, lift your rib cage. So I'm going to sit up straight, then I'm going to lift the rib cage. That doesn't mean I lift my shoulders. Shoulders are just hanging. It's like I've set up a table and the shoulders are like the tablecloth, just hanging over the edges. And now we've set up the body so that there's some freedom down here for these muscles to work properly. The third point then is inhaling But before this, I want to show you an object lesson that I use that I think helps with concrete experience too on this concrete referent. I'm going to turn this off. And let's move the camera over to the piano. I'll show you a little thing that I do. Okay, so we're set up at the piano. And I've got my book. I'm not really going to read out of this book, but it'll be like this. This is a demonstration of it. The students amused, and I'll say, what do you suggest? Can you help me? I say, well, put it up on the stand. Oh, okay, let me put it up here on the music stand. And now maybe my hands are more free to work in here. Is there any reason while I'm playing here that I would want the book to fall back in my hands? Of course not. I want the book to stay up on the shelf while I play so that my hands are free to work. Well, as with the book, so with the rib cage. I view the rib cage like, let's put it up on a shelf, out of the way, so that I'm free to work down here with my hands and that nothing's in the way. And does it stay there while I'm playing? Yes, it stays there the whole time I'm playing. So before I breathe, I lift it up, then I never let it drop. All right, I'm going to move back over to the other position now. Okay, so now we're ready for step 3, which is inhaling. So I'll have the student put their hand into my stomach here, and while they're feeling, and I'm just sitting here slouched over and like I'm not playing. So okay, now I'm going to get ready to play. I sit better up straight, and I lift the rib cage. Oh wow, look how that opens this up. Yeah. Now feel what happens when I inhale. Oh yeah, it fills up down at the bottom here. Exactly. Have you ever filled a bucket with water and the water stayed in the top of the bucket and the bottom was empty? Well, no, of course not. All right, so this is the point. We don't do that with the air either. The air has to fill up from the bottom up. So when I inhale, I'm going to aim my air at my hand. So I'm filling up the bottom of the bucket. So, okay, I've got my body set, and I'll have them do this. They'll fill this, and then I'll have them do it. And they'll fill this, and I'll have them do it. By the way, it's important to be appropriate here. If I'm dealing this with a young boy, I don't mind putting my hand in his stomach. I might ask him if he's okay with that. I think it's a good idea to always ask permission. With the young ladies, I wouldn't put my hand into their stomach. I would say, put your hand on your stomach. Are you okay if I put my hand on the back of your hand and feel what you're feeling? Yeah, that's okay. All right. And I think it's really important to gain those kinds of permissions and avoid any kind of litigious situation. So anyway, I'll have them do this. I'll say, okay, let all the air out. Okay, now don't breathe in yet. Lift your rib cage. Now inhale, aim at your hand. Exactly. Now, of course, most of them at first are going to be going, and they're going to be filling up here, which is backwards. All right, so I think that any kind of metaphor, object lesson, analogy is also helping to refer to concrete experience in the student's past. And that will help them gain a concrete understanding of what these nebulous concepts are. All right, so step 4. All right, we've prepared the body. We're sitting up straight. We've lifted the rib cage. Now I inhale and my stomach pushes out. Now I exhale and I keep pushing. Purse the lips, so it's more like playing. Creates a little bit of resistance there. And while I'm blowing out, I keep pushing with my hand. This gets the muscles working to push, keep pushing at the foundation of the sound. Now, as they run out of air, there'll be a tendency to let this just sag down. Why? Because the muscles start really pulling if you don't let it go down, and it starts crying to go down, and then most students will just let it go down. When you let it go down, though, you're going to feel that it feels like jello here. There's no muscle usage. Once that rib cage goes down, the muscles can't keep operating. And of course, this is where we need the support the most of any time is at the end of our breath, when we're running out of breath. And if we let the rib cage drop, we've completely negated any kind of breath support at that point. So I have 2 points about exhaling. Number 1, keep pushing with the stomach. And number 2, don't let the rib cage collapse. We lifted it in the first part of the process. We want to keep it up all the way to the end. So the whole process would look like this. All right, we're sitting around. Sit up straight. Okay, now lift your rib cage. All right, now inhale and push against your hand. Don't drop the rib cage. Keep this up. Go till you're really out of breath. And the rib cage is still up and things are really pulling. That's the feeling that I want them to get. I want them to feel those muscles work like that. And so those are the 4 steps. I'm going to illustrate that, then I'm going to have them do it. I'm going to illustrate it, have them do it. We'll go back and forth until they've actually felt that and experienced that. And then I'll say, okay, now let's put it on the horn. So then it's the same process. All right, posture, lift the rib cage, inhale, and you can play, let's play a note we only have to have one hand for. So we'll play a B. And then put your other hand in your stomach and feel and see if you still feel the same thing with the instrument. So, okay, good. And then once we blow out, I'm still pushing here. I'm not letting the rib cage drop, and those muscles are going to work. And that student's going to have a referent ever after for what breath support means. It's a simple process to really help this happen, but I've used it with hundreds of students to great success. And we get those muscles really working the way they're supposed to work as a foundation for our sound. Now, if we've done a good job getting the embouchure, oral cavity, and breath support to coordinate with each other, they should manifest themselves in terms of the mouthpiece pitch. Let me illustrate that. We can play a lot of different pitches on the mouthpiece. I can play more than an octave. So the point is, where should we be playing? And I think this makes a good barometer as to whether these 3 aspects of tone production are working together properly. If I'm playing, it's not going to work. It's going to be thin, bright, sharp. It's not going to be the sound we want. If I'm playing, it's probably going to be a little flabby and saggy and flat sounding and not a pleasant sound. I'm not sure if that's an A, but it should be. We want a concert A on the mouthpiece alone. I think it's a good exercise to actually play pitches on the mouthpiece. This is a Joe Allard thing, one of the great gurus of saxophone teaching. Play scales and chords and even simple tunes in your mouthpiece. I actually had to do stuff like that at a recording session one time. Crazy. But we want to get the mouthpiece pitch so that the things are working right here. And most students are playing way too high. They're going to be playing around a B, C, maybe at least probably a B flat. I want them to get them down to an A on the alto. And on the tenor, that's a G. Could even be as low as an F sharp. On the soprano, it's a C. On the baritone, it's a D. And over hundreds of kids that I've checked on those mouthpiece pitches, almost all of them are playing too high in the mouthpiece pitch range, which is going to account for why they're so sharp a lot of the time, especially on those challenging notes that want to be sharp. So the mouthpiece pitch can be a helpful part of teaching. And I ask the students to actually do that 4 or 5 minutes a day. I try to do it when nobody's home. It's obnoxious, but 4 or 5 minutes getting the right pitch in the mouthpiece so that we get some muscle memory build up here about what it takes to blow at that level. Then if we get at that level, we can push the mouthpiece in where it's supposed to go and things start to line up the way they should. If I'm playing too high in the mouthpiece pitch, I'm way pulled out and the low notes are going flat and the high notes are still sharp and nothing's coming together. Talk more about intonation in another chapter, but these are the foundational basic things that are going to let us succeed with those other things. So number 1, I've got to have a good mouthpiece. I've got to have a good embouchure. Number 2, I've got to have the oral cavity working properly. Number 3, I got to have my breath support working properly. Those should manifest themselves with the correct mouthpiece pitch. And I should mention that even though I might be supporting correctly, I do have to produce the right kind of airstream. This isn't mine. I got this from Eugene Rousseau that I studied with years ago. But he would say, blow on the size of a silver dollar. Try to cover the area, or you can even say cover the palm. Or it's a little bit like fogging your glasses when you want to clean them. And then rub. That's what I call a warm airstream. It produces a warm feel on your hand. If you think about it, it's very breathy. There's a lot of air that moves out of my lungs quickly, but in reality, it's not moving very fast. Compared to if I blow on the size of a pinpoint, or maybe like cooling your soup. It feels cold on the hand. That's what I call a cold airstream. The cold airstream, by definition, is a small amount of air moving fast. So if I took a breath in, about halfway maybe, it's going to be a while before I get empty because I'm not really using that much air. But what air is moving fast because of the small opening. If I have a large opening, the air goes out quickly, but it's not actually moving that fast. You can hear it in the pitch. Or so different instruments respond better to different kinds of airstreams. And in general, the larger the instrument, or the larger the bore of the instrument, the warmer the airstream needs to be. So with the saxophone, we're going to be playing a little warmer than we are with the clarinet. The flute is a very cold airstream instrument. The oboe is a cold airstream instrument. The clarinet needs a very cold airstream. This is how we speed that reed up. On the saxophone, we don't want it to be that fast. Would make it vibrate faster than it wants to. Now, I can't give you the exact feel. Nothing's as warm as, not even tuba would be that warm, but it's compared to clarinet, up here versus, we can kind of hear the difference in how fast the air is moving. We have to match that to the instrument that we're playing. And I found, too, that it seems like the airstream is maybe a little warmer for some jazz playing than it is for classical playing. I find that classically, well, I'm not... the reason a lot of people talk about this in this state is because of me, because I've talked a lot about warm and cold airstreams. But when I'm dealing with a student classically, I often find myself saying, yeah, but not that warm. Colder. It's got to be more focused and faster so we get that clear vibration happening. Breath support needs to manifest itself in terms of good, in terms of the right airstream type. And there are, of course, varying degrees of coldness or warmth. Then that should all manifest itself in the mouthpiece pitch. I actually got ahead of myself there. I should have said the stuff about air before I said the mouthpiece pitch stuff. But then I'm going to try to get that correct mouthpiece pitch. That'll set me up for success. I think I'm not going to say a whole lot about the reed. I've got another chapter where we'll talk at length about how to work with the reed and what needs to happen. I will say that it's really important that the reed seal on the mouthpiece, and so I will put a heavy layer of saliva with my tongue on the lay part of the mouthpiece and then put the reed into that, and that will help it seal more. And I put it together. And I'm very fastidious about lining up the reed just right, and then about firming up the ligature. I want it to have a good bond with the mouthpiece. You'll hear people say, well, don't firm it up too much. Just keep it light. Bad idea. Why not firm it up too much? Well, after a while, the pressure creates a little bit of a window imprint on the back of the reed. Take your knife and get rid of it. You don't need to worry about tightening your ligature screw. You just need to keep it tight so that it's firmly bonded with the mouthpiece. That's going to make everything work a lot better. I will say, too, that And we'll talk more about this actually, I think, in the other chapter when I deal more with solving tone problems and how to solve reed problems and so on. Just in general, though, there's a lot of information on instruments and ligatures and mouthpieces and reeds in the book. I think I won't rehash all of that here. We're getting kind of long. But I will mention that, well, while we're talking right here, that I've found this to be extremely useful for working with my reeds. This is lanolin. It's the brand name Lancino, HPA lanolin. Lanolin. It's 100% pure lanolin. That's what the box looks like. The tube looks like this, similar, same color. And I actually, when I put my reed away, I take out some of that and wipe it on the reed on both sides, put it in the reed guard with the lanolin on it. It won't play with lanolin on it. So the next day, when I get ready to play again, I'm going to have to, I keep paper towels with me and I have to wipe the lanolin off to be careful not to break the tip of the reed. But I'll get rid of the lanolin, and if I need to, I'll just slightly soak it. The reed really doesn't dry out this way so much, but if I need to, I'll slightly soak it to get rid of the rest of the lanolin. To me, it's pretty much tasteless, although I've had a few students complain about the taste, but I think it's fairly tasteless. If you live in a western part of the United States like I do, it's very dry, and really this is the desert. It's very dry in the air, and so I always put my reeds in a plastic bag. This keeps them from drying out so fast, and they also dry out more level this way. You just don't want the reeds to warp. I like these D'Addario reed cases. I'm not as worried about the humidifier that comes with them because I've put in a lanolin on them, and two, I'm keeping in the plastic bag. But that is a good idea, and they come with little packs that humidify the case, and they're actually two-way humidifiers. So if it gets too humid, it sucks it in, and if it's not humid enough, it puts it out and keeps the humidity at a regular level for the reeds. Those things are very good ideas for caring for the reeds. If you're using a synthetic reed, and the Ligatures reeds have gotten to be really quite good. If you're using a synthetic reed, I would just say you don't have to worry not so much about warping. Take it off and wipe it off, though, each time you finish playing. It's really tempting to just leave it on the mouthpiece all the time. And I did that for quite a while with a tenor reed, and it got calcification on the back of it that I've never been able to get off, and the reed never played right again. But we really do have to worry about the reed sealing on the mouthpiece, and therefore we have to worry about whether it's warping or not. When I lived in the Midwest and the Mid-South, I did not have to worry about this. The humidity was so good there. I could just take off the reed, throw it on the table, see you tomorrow, back, put it on tomorrow, and it's fine. My first winter here in Utah, I had 9 really great reeds that I was getting ready for a recital that I was going to do. And I thought, this is fantastic. I've never had 9 really good reeds before in my life. I came and I took them off, like I'd done in Indiana and Kentucky and so on. I turned them upside down and just put them on the glass on my desk. I came back the next day and they were all warped so bad they wouldn't even play. And that's when I had to say, what do you guys do around here? It's very, very different if you're in a dry climate. So you have to decide where you're at. If I'm leaving for a few minutes, I'll wet the reed and put a cap on it. If the cap has holes in it, I guess I should show you one of these, but I'll actually tape it up. Here, I got one over here. This is a clarinet cap, but I don't know if you can see this or not, but it had a big slit right here. So I put black electrical tape on it and got that so that when I put it on, it seals better. If I'm going to leave a few minutes, I'll slobber on the reed, put that on there. It'll keep it good from warping. If I'm going to, a lot of times I'll go to a rehearsal for a show, and then we go to dinner and we come back and do the show. When that's the case, I'll take it off, put it in a plastic bag, come back, put it on, ready to go. Reed's still in good shape. There's a lot of things that we have to do depending on our climate to make sure that we're taking care of business on the reeds. I'm actually going to suggest some things about adjusting and how to fix the reed if it's leaking and things like that in a different chapters. So I think I'll not spend too much time on this. You can read about my thoughts and suggestions on instruments and ligatures and mouthpieces and so on in my book. I will say, though, that I love the Rousseau mouthpieces for my classical playing. I love the Jody jazz mouthpieces for my jazz playing. On the soprano, I'm playing a Jody 6-star. On the alto, these are DV mouthpieces, 7. On the tenor and the Barry, 8-star. On the classical mouthpieces, I'm playing the NC3 on the soprano, NC4 on the alto, NC5 on the tenor, and NC4 on the Barry. And I'll put up a video that'll kind of sample sounds of those mouthpieces and stuff for you too. But I think that that's all I'm going to say right now. I will say that I love this cannonball saxophone. I played the Mark VI instruments for years and years. Loved them. I was finally convinced to go to the Yamaha. I like the Yamaha instrument quite a lot. I like the Eastman instruments quite a lot too. But nothing's quite like this cannonball. This is the Stone series, but they also make some other models. The Vintage series is really a lot like the Mark VI, but much more in tune, more modern instrument. And ligatures, all my ligatures are Silverstein now. The cheaper ligature Rovner I used to use quite a bit, but and I have the Van Doren Optimum ligatures, quite good ligatures, but nothing's quite as good as a Silverstein for me right now. So they're expensive, darn it. But I do have the Silverstein for each of my mouthpieces, classical and jazz. All right, well, that's probably enough for now. I hope you've enjoyed going through some basics of tone production. We're not done with the basics chapter. We're going to come back on the next video and deal with the basics of articulation. So thanks for listening and watching, and come back on the next video with me. Thanks.